What's up, guys? Welcome to the Put Me In Coach podcast,
where we go beyond the headlines and deep dive everything NFL.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Andy.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much. All right, my man. All right. We are heading out to Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
A great show.
The best show. And, yeah, man, we're kicking off the Eagles in this episode. And this is a team I think both of us have been waiting for, because it's really kind of putting our analytical skills to the challenge and our breakdown skills to the challenge, because we have a team that we watched be the best team in the NFL in 2022 and make the Super Bowl and have a player quarterbacking who, in my humble opinion, probably should have been the MVP. No disrespect to Patrick Mahomes. I thought he had an MVP season. And then turn around and completely implode the following year. So we're in a weird zone where it's like,
yeah, are
you guys contenders or nah? I guess we're gonna try to figure that out, man. But
sure thing.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining me. I know this has been one that we've kind of had circled, and
of course, Philly fans were not nice to me initially when we first started this channel. They were very upset with me for getting the name Darius Slay wrong. What did I say? DeAndre Slay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Lions fan, guys. I know what their names are. It was just a little slip up.
I remember that.
It's Darius Slay. It's DeAndre Swift.
Yep. And
I don't know. And neither of them are very good anymore. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is too,
DeAndre's just not your problem anymore.
The other thing is too, I think with us, we've had to really let go of just feedback with a lot of this stuff, because the reality is, I think this fan base in particular, and to be honest, I love passionate fan bases. It's no shade. I just think there's a lot. This is maybe the most charged up kind of irrational fan base that there is in the league. Yeah. So it's just sort of I feel like no matter what we say on this, you guys just aren't gonna really rock with it. So we're just gonna be honest, and that's what we're doing. So play the tape. Let's roll it. Philly. Okay, welcome back, guys. Please like, comment, subscribe, get into it if you're filing in. If you're sticking with us for the episode, Philadelphia Eagles, man. Look, I touched on it in the beginning, but I kind of want to reiterate my point with particularly sticking with the 2023 season and kind of building from there. Coming off of the Super Bowl run, coming off of what I thought was one of the more impressive seasons I've seen an NFC team kind of pull out of their hat in a couple of years. They didn't come out of nowhere, but I don't think any of us expected them to be that good in 22. They really delivered a great season.
Yeah.
And they started off 10-1 last year. I mean, they really didn't. They came out and it looked choppier. It didn't quite look as good. There were some question marks, I think, for those of us like myself who watched this team every week. I think there was some eyebrow raising of play calling and some offensive stuff, which we are going to unpack in this episode with the coordinators that were there last year, who, with all due respect, were dog shit. But you lost 5 of 6 to close out the regular season, and not only did you lose 5 of 6, but week 17 you lost to the Cardinals at home pretty soundly to lose out on the 1 seed, which meant that you then had to go on the road because you also lost the division to the Dallas Cowboys, which that's just a disgrace. You can't lose the division to the Dallas Cowboys as a Philadelphia Eagles. That's sacrilege. But you did. And the whole season culminated with a 32-9 loss in Wildcard Weekend to Tampa Bay. I want to start with talking about the QB, and I'm going to pass it over to you. But before I do, I do want to say one thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was a disgrace. Okay?
Yes, it was.
And screw you fans coming in here being like, oh, don't talk about... Screw that. That was the most embarrassing lack of effort I've ever seen a good football team put together down the stretch. Yeah. And I think you quit on your coach. I think you quit on each other. I think your defense especially quit. And I'm going to give Jalen Hurts a pass because I believe that he truly was pretty injured for that whole second half of last year. And that's something that, we'll unpack as we talk about Jalen. But your coach being on the hot seat going into this year is a massive concern for me. And I guess my question for you is, after a borderline MVP season in 22 from Jalen Hurts, followed up by a regression season, where do you stand walking into 24 on this quarterback who's become a little bit polarizing in the football world, right? Like, people are kind of not sure what they think about him anymore. But what do you think about him?
I think that he has now become the most overrated and simultaneously underrated player in the NFL. And it reminds me a lot of when you're talking about Kobe Bryant's career, right? Like, not that Jalen's accomplished what Kobe did, but it's almost this thing of where you have like Laker fans constantly being like, oh, Kobe's the GOAT. And it's like, well, no, he's not the GOAT. So then to swing the pendulum back, you're having people be like, oh, he's not even top 15. It's like, well, no, he's definitely top 15. This is how I feel about Jalen coming into this year, right? It's like you have Eagle fans, especially coming off of the 2022 season, being like, oh, he's like neck and neck with Pat Mahomes, which, if you watch the Super Bowl, he kind of was. And I do agree with you. I think that year he deserved MVP, and I'll be frank, in that game he was the better quarterback for a majority of it.
Which is crazy, but it's facts.
It's facts. And so coming into 23, it did feel like he was a top 3 quarterback. It felt like he had fully arrived. It felt like, this was another guy who was going to kind of be in that top 4 that you and I always refer to, which is, Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, and Lamar. You kind of, one of those guys had to go. And it was, I think, going into the season, especially with the injury in training camp, I think it felt like Burrow was out and Hurts was in, and everybody was kind of running with that train. And then you have a season like you did, and now you're seeing top 10 lists and he's not even on it. And it's like, well, okay, they collapsed down the stretch, but man, they started the season 10-1. Like, they're not, you know what I mean? Like, they pooped their own season away. I don't think it's particularly Jalen's fault, but I also think that opposing defensive coordinators kind of figured him out a bit. When kind of doing my research on this and figuring out what happened. One, I think the biggest thing that happened is I think your coach sucks. I think your coach and your quarterback don't like each other. And I think your quarterback is actually a mature human being. And I think your coach is just a rah guy. He doesn't call any plays. He causes a ton of drama. He acts like just a complete buffoon a lot of the time. And I think what we saw last year was an entire team quit on that man. And we'll get to that later. I don't want to spend too much time on the coach right now, but I do think that is the biggest issue of what happened last year. But I also noticed that when I was looking at Jalen's numbers and looking at like, okay, what exactly went wrong with this guy? It seems like opposing defenses figured out that when you blitz him, he becomes kind of a shell of who he normally is. Just looking at last season, his completion percentage against the blitz, 63% opposed to 67. His yards per attempt, 6.9 opposed to 7.4. His touchdown to interception ratio, 9 and 8 opposed to 15 and 7. His scrambles, 15 opposed to 32. His QBR, his 82 opposed to 95.3. That's a big difference. It's a really big difference. And it seems like if defensive schemes can kind of neutralize him and avoid the scramble, he's not able to extend. I mean, it sounds very obvious, right? Like if he can't scramble, he can't extend plays and he can't make things happen. But that's what they're doing. There's a lot more QB spies. It's a lot more blitzing on him. It's a lot more, okay, we got to focus on him and get him to force either like a check down, a bad throw, or just, get a sack, right? That's the ultimate goal. And I thought it was interesting on passes 20 yards or more when against the blitz, he only completed 30% of those, which when you add in the fact that he's now has Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator who loves to drop back and throw it deep, as we saw last year with the Chargers, and we saw the years prior with Dak Prescott. I mean, you guys know, right? It might leave a lot to be desired. I'm not saying that him having Kellen Moore is like a detrimental to his game, because I don't think it will be. I think it's actually going to be a better version of what we saw last year, particularly down the stretch. Because I like Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts is I have no loyalty to Philadelphia. I have no loyalty to the Eagles. I don't really feel any type of way about your team, to be totally honest with you. But I know a franchise quarterback when I see one, and he's a franchise quarterback. He talks to the media. He takes accountability. He seems like an incredibly likable guy. And, the player that I watched in that Super Bowl 2 years ago was one of the most dynamic players I've seen in years. I mean, it was very, very fun to watch, and I was fully pulling for you guys. But yeah, I mean, I think Moore is probably going to dial up some things that get the best out of his game, especially with this offense, and I'll let you cook on that in a second. But I do worry about Jason Kelce not being there anymore. I do worry about, this seemingly defensive scheme being figured out. So I don't know if I'm ready to say that he's going to get back to that 2022 MVP form. I felt like that was kind of a magic in a bottle season. But would it terribly surprise me if you guys did that again? No, not really. But let's move off of Jalen, unless you have anything to add on to it.
Yeah,
because I kind of want to hear about these weapons.
Yeah, I'll mix it in. I mean, I will say this. Talking about the offense, I wanted to kind of take what you were talking about, what you just kind of briefly touched on with the Kellen Moore hiring, and kind of use that as a pivot into my next piece of this offense, which does include Jalen.
The motion.
The motion is important.
The motion. I think that's something I forgot to mention. The motion is huge. But tell us.
Yeah,
about
I mean,
it,
you were last in the league in motion last year, which is unacceptable.
Yeah.
You have to be able to add these things and add these wrinkles into the offense. But I think for me, I have two minds about the Kellen Moore hire. Number one, I think that Eagles fans are overreacting a little bit and forgetting the fact that this guy was dismissed from the last two jobs that he had. Great OCs don't get served walking papers, okay? That's number one.
They go become head coaches.
And that's not happened. I will say this. I think for me, your concern about Jalen Hurts in this offense, I think, is super valid. And I think it's just because Kellen Moore hasn't seen a deep crossing concept that he didn't love. And I think for me, part of the reason, outside of what you didn't mention, and I think is very valid, we talked about it on Jags with Trevor. He was hurt last year. Jalen Hurts was not healthy.
Yeah.
That knee was jacked. He was running around with a knee brace. He looked hobbled for that whole second half of the year. And I think that was part of it. So I think his health coming into this year is going to be a massive sort of determining factor on how good of a season he's going to have. And it sounds like he's doing well at camp. So we pray that he stays healthy. But I think to start offensively, I want to touch on the signing of Saquon Barkley, because I think you ran your offense one way last year, and if Kellen Moore comes in here and tries to do that again, you guys are going to be totally screwed. You have to get back to the RPO stuff. You have to get back to read option with Jalen and Saquon Barkley in tandem, running this offense as an as a run-first offense. And that's going to be really hard for a guy like Kellen Moore, who has not shown in his time in the NFL that that's what he likes to do. I touched on it last year. Brian Johnson failed this team tremendously as an OC. Another issue I have with Sirianni is giving Brian Johnson that job when we all kind of saw he wasn't. It just showed that he wasn't a good OC with the schemes. I mean, running all these plays out of shotgun, running DeAndre Swift out of halfback power, no creativity in the run game. And eventually their offense became very simply a formula of Jalen Hurts in shotgun, throw the ball 40 times a game, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, go try to out-talent the other team. Go. 3-2-1 break. And if Kellen Moore brings that to this team, they are completely cooked. Saquon didn't have a great year last year in New York. I don't really blame him. I blame that offensive line. And frankly, when you look at what Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift have done the last 2 seasons behind this offensive line, I think if Kellen Moore can stick to that identity in the run game and stick to the RPO stuff, and this offense can start with the running game and start with the RPO stuff with Jalen and Saquon, I think you have a real chance to be the best offense in the NFC, hands down. And I honestly, like, as a Detroit Lions fan, as a Niners, watcher of the last 4 years and what they've done, you don't have Kyle Shanahan calling plays and running your scheme. So I don't know that I buy into this like CMC, Christian McCaffrey, resurrection thing that Eagles fans are talking about with Saquon and Philly, but I do think behind that O-line he has a chance to be great. And the reason why I love it is because teams aren't going to be able to stack the box the way they really need to against a run-first team because of these wide receivers. When we look at it, if you're running RPO stuff with Jalen and you're running through Saquon and you're running that style through that system, what it's going to do is it's going to spread the defense out, right? So you're going to be able to lead with the running game, and if you try to go pass heavy, you're basically going to be limiting your running back and your quarterback. But if you go run first, you're going to be opening up the outside. And I touched on it earlier in the episode. I do honestly think that this is the best wide receiver tandem in football. I really, really do. A lot of people are going to cry Waddle and Hill. For me, I like Devonta Smith more than Jalen Waddle. I think A.J. Brown is right there in the top 5 of wide receivers. He's shown it the last 2 years in Philly. I think when I look at this offense from a piece perspective and from a sort of who's going to benefit the most, I think something that nobody is talking about in the passing game is Devonta Smith really fitting what Kellen Moore likes to do with motion and slot. To me, he stands to gain the most from this scheme. I don't think that we've seen Devonta Smith's final form. He came into the league really polished, and we talk a lot about these young wide receivers and these twos and these guys and kind of the tiers of wide receivers, but only one of those guys got a Heisman Trophy at home. And I really, really believe that if Kellen Moore can resist the urge to drop Jalen back 45 times a game and run deep crossing concepts down everybody's throat, and he can lead with RPO, he can lead with Saquon's running abilities, they can lead with the offensive line in the trenches, they can run, quarterback power, quarterback draw. Like I said, the run-pass option stuff with Jalen, I think it's going to open up these receivers to be more open than they've been the last couple of years. And so for me, I'm just really, really interested to see if Kellen Moore can do that. Because with A.J. Brown on one side, Devonta Smith on the other, I think you have the best wide receiver tandem. And I don't know if there's another level to A.J. Brown's game, but I know the level that we've seen the last couple of years it's unhinged, man. Like, he's so good. And he started off the season, I don't know if you remember this, but he was wide receiver 1, 2, 3 for the first half of last year again. And then he tailed off and he imploded and the team imploded, and that's a different story. But I think with these two wide receivers, the challenge and the concern I have with Kellen Moore being your OC is, can he resist the urge to just keep doing what they did last year with trying to pass their way out. Because I agree with you. I love Jalen Hurts. I'm a Jalen Hurts believer. I think where he really excels is being a dual threat quarterback, having a run game, having balance, and being able to run the ball himself. I don't think that he's a pick you apart, drop back 45 times a game out of shotgun passer. I just don't. And
he's not.
Dak Prescott did struggle with turnovers with Kellen Moore at OC. That was one of the big reasons why Dallas let him go. And Dak was better last year. That's my concern with it. But I do think that those guys really are probably the best three-headed monster at running back and wide receiver in this league right now. Just to touch on a couple guys, Dallas Goedert broke his arm last year. I don't know what the official injury was, but he'll be back and healthy. I still think there's a place for him in this offense. I think he's a really good tight end that people have kind of forgotten about. And there is a player that they drafted this year because you have Paris Campbell listed as your 3. And I think the guy I'm looking out for is Johnny Wilson, because this team does lack receiver depth. I don't think they need it given who they have at 1 and 2. But he's a 6'7" guy, really tons of raw talent out of Florida State. And he fell pretty far in the draft, into the 6th round, and they scooped him up. And that's a guy that I'm kind of keeping an eye on as camp news comes out of what's this guy going to do? So that's kind of my breakdown. I know it was a bit all over the place, but that's kind of where I am offensively. I think you have to establish a run first identity with Jalen and Saquon this year if you want to win a Super Bowl. And that's it. That's where I stand on it.
Yeah. I feel that.
Yeah.
That's kind of exactly how I feel.
Yep. And
I think I don't have many questions about their offense, honestly.
I don't either. I think it's really good.
It's a really good offense. I more have I like you said, I kind of do more have questions about Kellen Moore.
But it's an upgrade.
It is an upgrade. I mean, it's a clear upgrade, but is it the upgrade? Kellen Moore is not Shane Steichen.
No.
That's just a fact.
And Shane understood exactly what I laid out. That's why you saw Miles Sanders have the year he had. That's why Jalen had that dual threat season. It's you've got to I don't know. And I know that Austin Eckler is washed, and he was never a great pure running back, more of a weapon, but the Chargers didn't run the ball at all last year.
At all. No, they didn't.
But man, he's dealing with one of the best running backs in football now. So you got to deliver,
Well, and the Cowboys didn't really run the ball since the Zeke fall off, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when's the last 2 years prior to that?
Yep. And with Kellen Moore, you saw
2021 was the last year that the Cowboys really were a run heavy team.
Yeah, and with Kellen Moore, you saw the explosion of Tony Pollard. But where was Tony Pollard most effective? The passing game. Yep. So Bingo. It is something to keep an eye on. If there's any chance that Kellen Moore sees this, that's my plea to you. Don't get away from the run. That's all. You got to run the damn ball this year. You just got to. You got to, because Jalen really can cook with these receivers if he's given a good running game, I think.
Big time.
I do want to pivot to the other side of the ball. I'm going to pass it over to you here. No pun intended.
Sure.
For the front seven, but I got to get one little thing off before I do it.
Go ahead.
I have a bone to pick with.
I got a bone to
pick with the Philly fan media and the mainstream media about this defense. Is it okay to be excited about this defense this year? Yes, it is. Is it okay to look at the drafting and some of these free agent acquisitions and look at them and go, okay, I'm curious. I'm excited. I think we did a little something, something. Is it okay to look at the fact that you served the worst coach ever, his walking papers, who was calling plays on your defense last year? That's how bad it got defensively last year for you. In Matt Patricia, and brought in a real guy like Vic Fangio. And is it okay to be excited about that? It is. I need you guys to stop selling me on the fact that this is an elite defense. It is not.
Oh, Man.
It is not an elite defense. I know you see what I see. It's constantly. It reminds me of that meme with the soldiers, and there's a clown like mixed in, where you'll have like all these great, like the Browns, the Jets, the Ravens, and then like you guys are in there, and it's like, what? When I go over the secondary after you do this, I'll touch on some of these numbers that I came across, and I'm sure you've got some numbers too that you want to talk about. But I want to hear your breakdown of the front seven, but I'm sorry, bro. I just had to get that off my chest because I'm really tired of being sold this bill of goods that Philly's got. And we just touched on the offense. The offense, forget about it. It's elite. It's that top tier. I think it's going to be a top 5 unit next year potentially.
100%.
I got some major question marks about this defense, and I'm serious about that. Like, I just don't. Marks. I'm not seeing it. So why don't you kick it off and give the people what they want here with some defensive breakdown? But I don't know. I think
your D line. Well, no, I'm with you, man. I think if you look at I don't remember exactly who it was. It was like PFF or maybe ESPN or something. You guys had like the number 4 or 5 ranked defensive line. And I come away looking actually looking at this defensive line and going, where is the 4th best defensive line? To start off, you have Brandon Graham. He's already said it's his last year. He's in year 15. Nobody will ever forget when he strip sacked Tom Brady to win the Super Bowl. But he did, he's in year 15. He's not an every down type of guy, right? He's a guy that you put in there on a 3rd down situation when you really need to play. And frankly, he's probably going to go get that play for you. He is still elite enough to do that, but that's kind of all he's good for at this point. You have Josh Sweat, who ends up being your, probably your like de facto edge, who doesn't, might be 2nd or 3rd on the depth chart, but ends up doing a lot of the heavy lifting. 79 pressures last year. He's a serviceable piece, but he's not an elite guy coming off the edge. You have Nolan Smith, who is, an athletic freak who showed a lot of promise in his time last year, but got very little time to play. Is he going to make a mega leap this year? Like, maybe. I mean, he's going from Matt Patricia to Vic Fangio. That's a good thing. But I don't know if Vic Fangio, much like Kellen Moore, is on his 3rd job in the last couple of years, right? So, yeah, good defensive coordinators also don't get served papers. So I do wonder what that jump looks like for Nolan Smith. Again, a super athletic and, had a crazy get off, but got bullied a lot in crucial moments, got really stuffed by tackles. And it was just kind of like, all right, I mean, any good guard, any good tackle is kind of taking him out of the equation. Unfortunately, you brought in Bryce Huff, which I think was a really good move for you. Jets, you brought him in from the Jets. He's an ascending player. I think he's a solid player, but he's not an A+ edge. He's not one of the elite tier guys.
He's a 3rd down guy.
He's not a top 10 guy. He's probably a top 15 guy. And could he make a jump to get to a top 10 guy? Absolutely. He's still young, but you just paid him a boatload of money. Sometimes after these contracts, you don't see the same amount of players. He comes from an elite defense with an elite defensive scheme over in New York. And he comes to this, which I don't think is elite. I don't think this is an elite scheme. So if he took a bit of a step back, that also, or just really stayed the same. That I think you need Bryce Huff to take a jump. I'm not sure that he will in this system. Moving to the interior, you got rid of Hassan Reddick, which was a good thing. I want to note that. I think Hassan Reddick is on the back 9. He's acting like a bit of a head case with this whole Jets thing and not wanting to sign his contract. I don't know what that's about. So moving on from Hassan Reddick and getting Bryce Huff is objectively an upgrade.
A nice maneuver by a very maneuvery GM.
A very nice maneuver. And I don't want to sound like I'm poo-pooing on Bryce Huff. I actually really like him as a player. I think to make this D-line elite the same way that it's being sold to me, Bryce Huff needs to be Nick Bosa, and I'm not even sure Bryce Huff is Aiden Hutchinson. You know what I mean? Like there's levels to this, and I think he would be kind of in a maybe a bottom tier B tier, maybe a high tier 3, or like I don't know. I'm not in love with him. Going on to the interior, you have Milton Williams, who, he might be the best interior. He might be the best rotational interior defensive lineman in this league. Just a solid piece, a solid player. But still, to nitpick a little bit, still a rotational guy, still a guy that's not going to be out there every single down. I think and I want to give a stat just to give Milton his flowers, because I do think he's younger and he is getting better. He's only taken 968 snaps over his 2-year career, so that lands him at 64th at his position. But his overall PFF grade is a 73.2, which places him at 32nd overall. So that, he's almost doubling his production, right? And I think that's super elite. He's great in the run defense, and he's got top 20 metrics among all interior D-line on the run. So, I think his struggle is pass defense, which, again, he's only been in the league 2 years. I'm not super worried about that. I think he's got a chance to get a lot better. And I think he's more of a rotational piece, because at nose tackle, you used very high draft capital on Jordan Davis a couple of years ago. Jordan Davis has left so much to be desired. It's not even funny. He's got every bit of it in him physically to be his running mate, Jalen Carter, to be Dexter Lawrence, to be Chris Jones or Quinyon Williams. He's got it in him, but he just looks like he doesn't care. He looks like he doesn't want to play football. He doesn't look like he's in shape. He's great on first and second down when you have a lead in the first quarter or the second quarter, but man, when you need him deep in those games in a tight battle, third and fourth down in a fourth quarter game that's going down to the wire, that's where you need these guys to step up, especially guys you used such high draft capital on. And he just looks out of shape, and he looks like he doesn't want to be there, and he looks gassed. And you just wonder, like, where's the dog in you? Like, where's the mental that goes in and goes, I want to be great. I want to be, I want to go get that sack and go be that guy. I mean, that's my, I'm not gonna sit here and say that I watched a ton of Jordan Davis every minute of every game like you guys did. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just kind of the takeaway I have. I think he could be one of the best defensive linemen in this game, and he just leaves so much to be desired. But the guy who doesn't leave anything to be desired is Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter is super elite, and I think he's the one piece really carrying this defensive line, and particularly this front seven as a whole. You drafted him last year. He was as advertised. He I think will make a superstar leap right now. I think he's more in the Christian Barmore class currently. Not quite a Dexter Lawrence, not quite a Quinyon Williams, but I do expect him to take that jump this year. Again, much like Jordan Davis has every physical ability to be one of the best, but he looks like he cares a little bit more. He seems like a guy who is reliable, who will play deep into games, who will play more than just first and second down, who will be out there on a fourth down play and go get the guy. I do want to talk about his club move. It's already elite. Like, could you imagine that coming at you even as a guard, right? I mean, guard centers, they're going to be big no matter what. Like you and me, we can't relate to how big these guys are. So having a guy like Jalen Carter coming over the top of you with just this arm that's, it's literally like a club, right? It's like, oh dang, I did not like that, right? So I expect him to take this jump this year. I think it's going to be really good, and I like him as a player. I really wanted the Lions to take him. I know that he, left a lot to be desired personality-wise with the whole driving away from the incident thing and coming to camp out of shape, but I don't know how he does it again, right? Just took a flyer on a guy that everybody was overthinking, and this is what ends up happening. That leads me to your linebacking core. I don't want to beat around the bush here. It's really bad. It's really, 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 really bad. You brought in Devin White. He sucks. He's not a good player. He wanted Well, he wanted a huge contract from the Bucs, and he ended up getting benched by the end of the season because he was that bad. Todd Bowles is a defensive mind who runs a great defensive scheme, who won a Super Bowl 3 years ago. And to be fair, Devin White was very good on that particular defense. He's washed now. I mean, could he be a little bit better with a new environment and a new setting? Potentially, but I think he's a me player. And I don't like that in the city of Philadelphia because I think it's contagious. He wants his. He wants to make the huge highlight play. He wants to go get the big interception, but it's at the cost of a huge play. And frankly, he's not hanging with these people anymore. He's slowed down a bit. He's lost a step. So when he's trying to go do, one of these me plays, as I've said, a lot of times last year it left guys wide open for huge yak yards, and he's just not good. And then you guys drafted Nakobe Dean a few years ago, and you ran victory laps about it because he was, a late first rounder in a lot of mocks, and I think you guys got him in the third. He dropped to the third for a reason. He's undersized. He stinks. He's coming off a Liz Frank injury that limited him to just 5 games last year, so he's hardly played. And I think he just kind of stinks. I don't think he's very good. And this has kind of been the bugaboo with your guys' front seven is the linebackers. You haven't been able to figure that out. Howie has not been able to figure that out the last couple of years, and it's the big missing piece on this defense. I think if you have a middle of the road defense, or I'm sorry, a middle of the road linebacking crew, you can have a very serviceable defense, especially with young guys like Milton, young guys like Jordan Davis, young guys like Jalen Carter, even young guys like Bryce Huff. It kind of wraps it up it puts the bow on the wrap, right? And this is just an unwrapped package. It's not buttoned up. This is a terrible, terrible, terrible linebacking core. And I think you guys are going to see that this year. I know that it's the Eagles, and you guys think that everybody who comes there is going to be, all pro, and they're going to be great because they're with us. And I just don't see it with this linebacking core. I just don't. I think they're going to be really bad and cost you guys at least a couple of games this year.
Mm-hmm. I think so too, buddy. I think so too, and I guess that kind of tees me off for probably the I like to use the analogy of like the Riddler from Batman layer-esque like level of question marks, just like tacky levels of question marks like planted everywhere.
I'm coming, my sweet. Like the jacket? It keeps me safe when I'm jogging at night.
To me, that's the secondary. I guess I'll start by asking the audience a question and you a question. Last year, when you watched back the San Francisco game, the Dallas game, the second Dallas game in Dallas,
he's trash.
The playoff game.
Yeah.
Was there a worse secondary in the NFL tackling-wise in the entire league?
Nope.
This is just an eye test gut thing. I don't have the numbers in front of me on who led the league in missed tackles and whatever. I just felt like this secondary couldn't tackle anything. Like, I feel like I could have thrown on a chin strap and a couple of cleats out there and just like broken one tackle, maybe had a chance to pop off. Like, I can run, by the way. So I think if I would have gotten out of one of those, I might have had a chance to get to do it. I mean, they were just throwing arms out there, right? It was just sort of like open season. And you saw it get worse and worse, and there were some injuries too. I know you had some backups playing last year, so I don't mean to make it like this big thing, like you couldn't tackle anybody and your secondary is horrible. But here are some concrete numbers that do stick out to me about the 2023 version of this secondary. 31st in passing touchdowns allowed, 31st in pass yards per game allowed, and 29th in passer rating allowed. So that would indicate a bottom 3 secondary in the NFL last season.
In the words of Deebo Samuel, trash.
Well, he's trash, and I'll touch on him in a minute. I mean, he's toast. But let's touch on a couple guys who aren't. Darius Slay. I think, as a Lions fan, I was very sad when Matt Patricia ran Darius Slay out of town and traded him away for a second-round pick. He was our best defensive back. And we tried to draft, Jeff Okudah to replace him, and it was a fail. And big play Slays. He's had a great career, man. I got nothing negative to say about him, except for the fact that he's turning 34 this year, and he is no longer a corner one. He showed it last year. You guys can lie to yourselves. You can squint your eyes. You can turn away from the TV and go, oh, I missed it. I didn't. He had problems tackling. He had problems sticking in coverage. He just isn't a cornerback one anymore. And that's okay, because he's going to be 34 years old, and he's had a hell of a career. I got nothing but respect for Darius as a Lions fan and as an Eagles, watcher and an Eagles supporter. So you drafted Quinyon Mitchell in this sort of hope that you've got your corner one this year. And Darius Slay can slide on over to that 2 spot, and you're going to live happily ever after. I guess my issue is that I going into the draft, I listened to a lot of these experts. And by the way, I've told Andy this. The experts are wrong as much as they're right. So every expert getting on here and going, this is a blue chip, this is an ace in the hole, there's no way this fails. Just remember the 15 guys last year in the first round alone, or the first 2 rounds, I should say, that they told you guys were foolproof and suck now. Every single year, half of these guys in the first round aren't good. I'm not saying Quinyon's going to be that guy. As I studied the tape, as I studied the film, as I kind of did my own research into this player, I think from a measurable perspective, from a prospect perspective, from a prototype perspective, he checks all the boxes. He's great in coverage. He's got length. He's lean. He's got good ball skills. He's not an undersized corner, but he's also not heavy. His hip movement is great. He's fluid. And my only reservation to all of this is you're asking a guy to come out of the MAC. And I grew up in that area. I mean, he played in Toledo, Ohio last year. And come into the NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles and be your corner one. We'll see. I think he's going to take a little time to develop. I think it's a great pick. I think he's going to be really good. He might be the best corner in this draft class, but he's coming into a situation where I think he's going to be expected to do a little too much, a little too soon. You brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Look, I could do the Lions thing and say, oh, he failed in Detroit. The reality is he got hurt. He talked a lot of smack. He didn't really do much for us, and we moved off him. And now you guys get back your, the prodigal son return, so to speak. I think he'll be a good addition to a unit that desperately needs it. I think you're incredibly thin at safety. I'm not sure if he's going to play the nickel role or a safety role, or kind of how this DB room's going to line up opening week. Anybody telling you that they do, I think, is being dishonest. I think Vic Fangio has his work cut out for him, figuring out what his sort of starting lineup, if you will, is going to be, what his rotation is going to be. But I think Gardner-Johnson is going to be a nice little addition to a defensive backfield that needs him. But I would also temper expectations a little bit. I think you guys are overselling me on that as well. And, well, let's talk about one more guy before I get to my conclusion, because I do have one more guy I want to talk about. And you mentioned him already. You alluded to him with the Deebo Samuel quote. It's over for James Bradberry. He's taking reps at safety. It's done. I saw what I saw last year. You guys saw what you saw last year. It's no disrespect. He's been a good corner in the past. He's washed. He's barbecue chicken. And you can't put him out on the field to start at cornerback. And you're not going to. Your starters at corner will probably be Quinyon and Darius Slay. But that's another piece that I think Vic Fangio is going to have a very hard time trotting out as anything. Yeah. I don't even know that he's going to be a starting safety. I want to close this group up with a guy that I feel like I am being oversold more than maybe any rookie in the league. And that is our boy, Cooper Dejean. I think, look, here's my issue with Cooper Dejean. I talked about this with Andy, and I'll share it with you guys. And I know a lot of you guys are going to dismiss this, but I do want you to think about it. I'm a Michigan fan. I watched Cooper Dejean a lot at Iowa. He, is a Big Ten connection. And a few years back, we had a guy named Jabril Peppers playing at Michigan who was just like Cooper Dejean, an elite athlete. He returned kicks. He played running back. He played wide receiver. He played all these different positions. And he was a really good DB. And even at one point, he was so good, he entered the Heisman race his last year at Michigan. And I watched him get drafted to Cleveland and completely fail because he didn't really have a position. They didn't know how to use him. He was a raw talent, and he was a raw athlete who took years to develop into the safety he is today in New England, which is a very good player. I think Cooper Dejean has every bit of that potential inside of him. If you've seen his dunk highlights, I mean, he's a freak, and he's awesome. He's fast. It's frankly sick as a guy who played a brief stint of high school football and played DB as well as slot receiver to see a white guy in the NFL playing corner. I'm into it. I want him to be as good as the rest of y'all. But I think the hype has left the station in a way that I'm a little bit worried about. I think the idea that this guy's going to come in here and be a serviceable starting corner as a rookie is a lie. And you know how I know that it's a lie? Because the same people that are telling me that this guy is going to be a lockdown corner as a rookie are also the same ones telling me that it's a good thing that he's taking snaps at safety. So which is it? Because lockdown corners don't have to go play safety, do they? I ain't never seen Sauce Gardner line up as a safety. You know what I didn't see any rookie year from Pat Surtain? Well, Pat Surtain's looking really good in camp, and they're running him out of the safety position to just see how that looks. No. Lockdown corners play lockdown corner. I think for me, when I look at a guy like him, who frankly wasn't as good in college or as athletic or as impressive as a guy like Jabril Peppers, he fell to the second round for a reason. I think there's reason to be excited. And I'm as excited as you guys. I think I totally get it. It's exciting. And he's, aside from just like the whole like white guy meme, he really is a fun player. He's explosive. And he can play, man. He even matched up against Marvin Harrison Jr. last year and played well. And I know you guys are going to throw that in my face. So there it is. I just admitted it. I watched it. I watched the tape. He's very, very good. But I don't know that him and Quinyon, but particularly him, are going to be the sort of light you up, lockdown, dynamic Batman and Robin thing. This sort of like hype train that's left the station here in Philadelphia as rookies. I gave you the numbers on the secondary. I'm going to stop talking about it now. I'll just say this. With Vic Fangio coaching, I'm excited. I think they'll be better. I think they have some pieces that I'm really interested to see how they develop. But I don't think that this is an elite unit by any means because of 2 draft picks. So that's it. I'm going to pass it over to you real fast to kind of close out this thing. Give me your thoughts on Philly next year. Where do you stand? We've talked a lot.
Yeah. I feel like I've harped on them for the last 47 minutes or whatever it is. And I do want to kind of end it on a high note. I do think you're going to win this division. I think you're a very good team. I think you have the potential to have the best offense in the NFL. The problem that I have with you in particular, which we've kind of alluded to throughout this episode and what we just got done talking about, is that I think you're very thin at defense, where we're being sold that you're very deep and you're very good. I don't believe that. I don't see that with my eyes. And granted, they don't work very well, but that's just what I'm seeing. And 2, I think you have a bad head coach. And if I could just rap about this for a minute, I'll end my segment with that. I think the time was to move off Sirianni was last year. You watched a very good team, objectively a very good team, quit on that man in Tampa Bay. And, it should have been you guys coming into Detroit to play us in the second round. But that didn't happen. You let Baker Mayfield send you home. And I think we all know that Baker Mayfield isn't some world beater. You guys were the better team. You were the better team all year. But that last, 5-6 weeks of the year, particularly that game was when it all hit ahead. You quit on your coach. And I think it was a disservice to you guys as fans. I think it was a disservice to the team. And I think it was a disservice to your quarterback to bring him back under the circumstances. he proved who he was. He proved that he is a bit of a fraud. He does not have Shane Steichen as his offensive coordinator, and he does not have Jonathan Gannon as his defensive coordinator. Jonathan Gannon was a great defensive coordinator, guys. I know you can sit here and say that he lost you the Super Bowl, whatever. He ran into Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Most people will lose in that situation. But the reality is you had very good coordinators that year in 22. And I believe he was being lifted up by them. And when left to his own fruition, he hired Matt Patricia and Brian Johnson. And you guys used a lot of your firepower that was coming off of that 22 season to win a lot of games. But the games that mattered most, you lost them. And particularly the one that mattered the most in Tampa, you gave up, you quit. And it looked like you quit.
You quit for real. You did.
You quit.
Let's get that out of the way.
Real. And I think that you did upgrade at coordinator, but I think you have two really good coordinators. I don't think you have a single great coordinator. And in 2022, you had two great coordinators. So I do ultimately think that when things get tight in the playoffs, when things get, the tension is up and the room for error is very, very little, you will get exposed. That defense will get exposed. You will get outcoached. It will happen. We've seen it for years. You guys have laughed at Dallas for years, saying, "Oh, Dak's a playoff faker. Dak's to this, Dak's to that." Well, the guy who is running that Dak offense is now your offensive coordinator. So, you might want to be a little worried. I think you can win a wild card game, I think you can win a wild card game. I think you can win a wild card game, but I don't think you're going to make it past the divisional round. This is not a Super Bowl roster. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it isn't. I think you'll go 11-6, and you'll win the division, but you will get bounced in either the first or second round. Yeah,
well said, man. It's funny. I had some notes that I took on the Sirianni thing that I was saving for last two, and you just hit that out of the park so eloquently. Don't be, bro. Listen, that's the thing. There is one thing that I did want to add on Sirianni before I give my prediction, and it's a hypothetical question, but maybe there's an answer that I'm not thinking of. But Andy and audience, when was the last time you saw articles coming out about potential head coaches that are going to be hired after the 2024 season? I mean, obviously, insert any year, for a team that's considered a contender.
Mike McCarthy in Dallas. That's it.
Yeah, but even then, are we really being given names? I guess Bill, but we were given Bill for Philly.
No, we're not. I'm
seeing articles from trusted sources.
Will he be fired?
I'm seeing articles from trusted sources come out of the camp in Philadelphia of like, here's a short list of names of guys who would be potential replacements for Sirianni after 2024, and I'm going, I'm not seeing that with Kyle Shanahan. I'm not seeing that with Dan Campbell. I'm not seeing that with Sean McVay. I'm seeing that with your coach. And that's just something I wanted to add to it because it was something that just happened recently. So it was just in time for this episode. I saw an article come out about the Eagles are eyeing Bill Belichick. And I'm like, what? The season hasn't started. It's so weird. I've just never seen that before. And I think it's a huge indictment on where this locker room is and where your culture is on a guy who is just he's a cornball. Let's just keep it a buck. Like, it's nothing against him, but like,
he's a jackass.
I don't think he's that dude, man. And I'm with you.
He's not.
I touched on it. This is not a fantasy football show, but maybe we'll become one as we continue to kind of sell out here. But I'm all the way in from like a fantasy football perspective on like this offense. I'm all the way in as a fan of this offense. I think Jalen Hurts is going to have a huge bounce back. I think Saquon's totally going to work. Like I said, I think it's the best wide receiver tandem in football. So it's for me, it's just not a concern. I just don't think, like you mentioned, the defense is a Super Bowl caliber defense. So
it's not.
I'm with you. I have some question marks about what's going on in Dallas, but I also have some question marks about you guys. And it seems like I'm the only one who watched the implosion last year, because if you turn on the TV, the media is just kind of like, they have you right back in the Super Bowl. And I'm not there. But here's to a good season. I hope that you prove me wrong. Obviously, like, not at the expense of my Lions, but I don't think you're beating my Lions. I'll just be honest with you. I'm with you. I think this is a 12-win ball club. I think it's going to be a really good team, and I like them out of the division. So I have nothing to say but really good things ultimately, because you are a contender. you're like fourth in the NFC for me right now, which is just where I stand on it. So that's kind of it. Guys, please like, comment, subscribe. Philly fans, give us hell in the comments. We kind of went in on some stuff, and I'm expecting it. So do your best, man.
Some pushback.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Everybody's the best player.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Peace.
Yep.